Welcome to the Let's Talk About It podcast with your host, Denise. Denise can be found on iamdenise.com and all social media platforms. On Let's Talk About It, we dive into the path along the journey while celebrating the human spirit, resilience, and ability to grow beyond limitations. Are you ready? Okay, then let's talk about it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It. I'm your host, Denise, and today I have someone that we are going to be talking about it, and you get to be in the room without being in the room. My guest today is Kalpna Suthar, and she is the author of Never Judge a Book by Its Cover, and we're going to explore the landscape of her journey, her process, her hills, her valleys, lessons she's learned along the way, and lessons she wants to share with you in her book, Never Judge a Book by Its Cover. So welcome. Yay!
Hey, I'm so excited to be here, Denise. Oh my God. I have been looking forward to this for a long time.
Oh my goodness. I'm happy, super happy because you and I, when we talked in the pre-screen, we had this conversation and we were just like, yes.
That should have been a conversation to record as well.
You know what? That should have been a conversation to record as well. Welcome to the show. I want to first jump in and start with the title of your book. What inspired the name?
So what I found in my younger years, especially when I was going to high school, college, most of my 20s, I felt like I was constantly being judged. I was being rejected by the world. In fact, I remember when I was in college, I applied for a part-time job in a supermarket that all my friends applied for. They all got the job. I was the only one that didn't get the job. And the reason for that, get this, was because I was too short. I'm 4'11", and they turned around and said to me that I'm too short to be behind a counter. And that was the reason they rejected my application.
Wow. How does that kind of messaging externally being constantly reinforced in your life? Because it sounds like not only was it being reinforced, like academically, it was like family, some friends, the world. How does that feed into the narrative that you already have about yourself? Is it in contrast, or is it just feeding into your own vulnerability of your identity?
So I guess I was still trying to search for who I was, what I wanted to do. So I wasn't sure if it was something that I was doing something wrong, or people were seeing something that I wasn't able to see, that I had no idea whether it was me, if it was other people, or what was going on. All I knew was that constantly teachers, family, my parents, jobs that I was applying for, everyone kept telling me that I was doing something wrong.
So
right?
when the external definition of who you are and how good you are or how good you're not feeds into your self-interpretation or your identity, it sounds like it's predicated on a very fractured sense of self in the first place, right? Because quite often we're in a position where it's like, yeah, you can't tell me. I already know I'm this, I'm that. So what was it that disallowed you from having a stronger sense of self at that age or at that point in your life, to the point where as it came in from the outside, you were even more affected and unaware of your own identity? What was your life like that brought you to that place where you didn't really know who you were anyway?
So yeah, it was exactly that. I didn't know who I was. It was almost like I didn't know anything that I was doing, thinking, or saying was right, or whether it was wrong. Clearly it was wrong because people kept telling me. And I was in a relationship that was very, very abusive, emotionally and physically, to the point where, again, in this relationship, I was told how to dress, how to do my hair, how to walk, how to talk. So again, constantly being told, especially I find the people that you hold closest to your heart are constantly telling you that you're doing wrong. I think that's where I lost myself even more. I didn't know who I was anymore. So, and I didn't know what I needed to do to correct it.
In that loss of self and in that space of not knowing who you were and not having value, right, reinforced around you, do you feel like that played a role in the selection of the partner that you chose and who eventually became abusive because you didn't have a frame of reference of your own value, and as a result of that did not pick someone who met the criteria of valuing you in a way which that person didn't?
Right. So at that time, that period of time, I did not actually get along with my parents. And we were constantly arguing. And they told me, the kinds of people I should be hanging around with, who I shouldn't be hanging around with. It's too late to be out at 10 o'clock, or etc. And so, because of that kind of atmosphere that I had at home, I went opposite. I rebelled, and everything that I shouldn't be doing, that's what I was doing. So completely. I end up going or being in a relationship with someone that I knew I shouldn't be with, but it was because I was rebelling against my parents.
And in rebelling against your parents, trying to not have a certain destiny, you essentially picked the destiny on the road you were taking in an attempt to try to avoid it.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, we're going to continue to talk about what destiny had in store for you and how it took you on the path as you made your way to write in this book, Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover, which is available on Amazon, and you can grab your copy and explore this journey with you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these commercial breaks. You are listening to Let's Talk About It. Welcome back to Let's Talk About It. My guest today is Kalpna Suthar, the author of Never Judge a Book by Its Cover. And as we do here quite often on Let's Talk About It, we're talking about it. We're talking about life experiences, overcoming obstacles, hills and valleys, and everything in between. So jumping back into your 20s, from what you've explained so far, it sounds like there were a lot of issues around identity, and you trying to find who you were and really trying to differentiate who you felt like you were versus what the external conversations were from society that they were defining you as. So share with us a little bit about the decade within your 20s and what that experience was like as you tried to navigate the landscape of life without a strong self identity.
So what I found that I started doing as the years went on, I started rebelling against the world almost, right? So where people were telling me you can't do this, you can't do that because I'm short, or because I'm a girl, or because I'm someone of color, and there's certain industries that I'll be successful in, there's certain industries I won't. I started rebelling against the whole world. It's almost like I just got pissed off, right? And I was like, no, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm going to do what I need to do, regardless of what anyone else says, because what they're telling me and what's been happening for the last year hasn't worked out for me. It's done me no good, right? I've lost myself in the whole kind of being in a volatile relationship with family, with friends, in personal relationships. And so what I found is I was going from job to job to job to job, people telling me this isn't how you should be living. You should find a particular job, stick with it, retire, and then enjoy your life when you retire, right? So then what I started to do is well, one thing is about perspective, right? Perspective is everything. When we talk about, how we see ourselves, how other people see ourselves, and if what we believe is what we're drawing into our lives, most definitely. I found that even though the supermarkets were telling me I'm too short to be working for those companies, what was so funny, years later, I joined the police force, yet they had no issues with my height. And then, I started, training to become an MMA a fighter. And I'm like, so all these other things were coming out of the woodwork. And I was like, well, maybe I was just meant for greater things. I wasn't meant to work in those supermarkets. Maybe I was there trying to, chase the bad guys, lock the bad guys up so we have a better world.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel like the perspective that you changed of how you saw yourself and the limitations that you were no longer going to accept minimize the significance of what people were telling you about your ability or your limitation?
So I think I got to a point where I just had enough and I started raging, right? And I was not that I had so much hate, or not that I was physically raging against people, but just raging against the whole world, that I'd had enough of this and I'm not going to deal with it no more. I'm not going to put up with it. I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm going to enjoy, you know, living the life that I'm living. And I'm not going to have anyone tell me what I should and shouldn't be doing anymore. I know what's right and wrong, and I will live my life to that.
And what was going on? Because a lot of times, and I've had this raging moment that you're talking about. I wrote a whole book of poetry called From My Heart and Rage to Yours, because I was just like so
Oh, wow.
mad. And I wrote that throughout that space. And one of the things that I found was that there was something about the anger that was very empowering.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about the anger that said no more. And it was a double-edged sword, because I also was not in the best place to receive anything from anyone, because everything that came in before was questionable, and I didn't find it to be something that helped me in the place that I was. And so there was an anger that came with that. So talk to me a little bit about what the catalyst of that anger was, and what you had to do to kind of shift yourself from anger to vulnerability.
Well, honestly, I think it was at a point where I was no longer going to have people tell me what I can and can't do. So I remember my first day when I started my first MMA class, right? Brand new to it, didn't know the different kicks or the punches or anything like that. And I remember this girl that was there. She'd been going there for a few months, I guess. And because I was so brand new, and they put me up, partnered me up with her as a sparring partner. At the end of it, she came up to me and she goes to me, maybe you should start the beginner classes. That's on Mondays.
What?
And that I could have gone mad on her. And at that point, I remember I was like, hell no. I'm going to come to these intermediate classes. I'm going to go to these intermediate classes. I don't need a beginner class, because I know I'm a quick learner, right? And I learned a lot more by doing. And I was like, watch me. I'm going to get really, really good, right? And then maybe in a few months down the line, I will spar with her and show her how freaking good I am.
So you are now using this as a motivation, whereas before it seemed like that's not how you were internalizing these criticisms, right?
No, so I found that all these criticisms now made me stronger, right? It gave me the fire inside that I needed to say to people, screw you, I'm going to do it, watch me, right? And so I remember a few months later, God, I think it was 4 months later, she came back to the class. And again, they put us both together to be sparring partners. And you know what? I'm so happy to say, but I kicked her ass. She landed on the floor, right? And I helped her get back up. And she looked at me, she was like, oh my God, you got good. I'm like, hell yeah, I got good, right?
So many times, I think people get themselves into this really interesting place where they're waiting for someone to come and cheer them on, where they're waiting for someone to save the day, to see the value, to see something within them that, they may not have even fully realized. And quite often, the gift you can give yourself is to dig around enough to find that and not wait for someone to, be your cheerleader. And from what you're telling me, it sounded like your process took you through this natural trajectory where you had to find your inner champion, your inner
That's right.
cheerleader.
It made me,
that sounds powerful.
I guess I had to gain thick skin, right? And I had to go through that process to gain thick skin, but I didn't know it at the time. You never do. But now reflecting back on it and looking at, me building this business and scaling this business, when you're in business, guess what? You need to have thick skin. So there's so many ups and downs, right? There's going to be so much rejection in business, right? There's going to be people telling you in business that, you're not good enough. There's going to be potential clients that say to you, screw you, but you got to keep on going. And what you need to realize is that that's just life. It's going to happen. And your services, your products isn't going to be for everyone. Your coaching isn't going to be for everyone. But you know what? You don't want everyone in your coaching program. You just want your raving fans.
Right. I want to piggyback a little bit off the thick skin syndrome, because I know that there are times when people get really caught up in having the thick skin, and they do create the thick skin, but because they haven't done the work beneath the epidermis, right? Then eventually it just kind of like spews out in a very toxic way, because they spent a great deal of time just thickening, the skin and not really dealing with the triggers that actually causes the skin to be so sensitive in receiving some of this stuff. And thickening your skin is one thing, but it sounds like you are also really doing a lot of work with your core issues of your perception, of understanding what your triggers were, of realizing that if I am going to do this or be this limited belief or this limited perspective or this area that affects me in a certain way, something that I have to work on and work through, and that externalize as having a thicker skin. But there are multiple steps that you had to take in order to get to that thicker skin, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, one of the biggest things that I did was I up and left and packed and moved from the UK, where I was born and bred, and moved to Bali, Indonesia, which is on the other side of the world.
Whoa.
Right? And I told my parents 2 weeks prior, oh yeah, I'm moving. They thought I was moving up the road. I was like, no, I'm moving to Bali, And they're like, what? How long for? Like, I was like, no, I'm moving. Once I'm gone, I'm gone, know? And the reason why I did that was because I needed to jump. There was something huge I needed to do. I needed to jump in order to figure out how I was feeling, my perception, my mindset, all of that stuff. And Bali is basically the hub of all of that, right? They meditate. Most of them are vegans. You're around, the natural habitat. You've got the animals, you've got the trees, you've got the sun, you've got the beach and all this stuff. And I met so many different gurus, spiritualists, that did a lot of that work. And I guess that's when a lot of the questions that I had were answered. Right.
It's interesting that you use the word jump, because as you're saying to me, I had to jump. It feels like you didn't really jump. It feels like you had to unhook yourself from the things that like held you in the place that
Right.
you were still not able to go beyond a certain space, no matter how hard you try. And that jump was predicated on you really needed to be untethered from everything that still kind of held you in a certain space that you now had no interest in being. You now wanted to take yourself mentally, spiritually, psychologically to a different space, and the space in which you were occupying was no longer enough to hold you in.
Right. And do you know what the funny thing is about that? Is when I told my family that I'm moving to Bali, they turn around and goes, "Oh, it won't last long. You'll be back in a month."
How long did you
Right.
stay gone?
2 years. Right?
2 years. Wow. What is
Yeah.
a powerful lesson you think? What is the most powerful lesson you learned having lived in Bali for 2 years and committing yourself to yourself for that period of time?
First of all was now I don't know if you know in the Indian background, but you don't move out of your parents' home unless you get married, right?
Mm,
So
okay.
I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna leave. But one of my biggest fears or concern that I had was, am I gonna be able to live on my own? Right? Like, I've never done this. Can I do that in a foreign country where I don't know the language? I don't know how the culture works. Can I actually do that? And I was like, "Do you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna do it and figure it out." Right? And the what I realized about myself is no matter what situation I'm in, I'm able to figure it out and get myself out of that situation. Right?
Mm.
And I don't have no help from nobody else. I'm there on my own and I gotta figure it out.
So
And
self-reliance, your biggest lesson you would say was self-reliance, that you were capable and able to be self-reliant in any way, shape, and form.
oh my god, yeah. Like from moving from Bali to Costa Rica on an opportunity that I got and then becoming homeless and getting myself out of that situation, I'm like, if I can get myself out of a situation from being homeless, having no shelter, no food, no water, right, no money, right,
Mhm.
and working my way through all of that because I'm able to kind of think outside the box, get another perspective on everything, and figure out a solution. Now I'm out of the pandemic, so I'm like, bring it on. If I can get myself out of that, pandemic is nothing, you know?
Wow. All right. We are going to take another break and come back. We are talking to the author of Never Judge a Book by Its Cover. And I can't wait to continue this conversation because I could only dream of making the jump that you did.
Awesome.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages. You are listening to Let's Talk About It. Welcome back to Let's Talk About It. My guest today is the author of Never Judge a Book by Its Cover. And before the break, we were talking about the leaps and bounds you took as you kind of navigated your way on this beautiful journey of life. And in your 20s, it was pretty rough because like a lot of people in their 20s, you're not, your identity isn't really rooted, and you're getting interpretations of that identity based on what people around you tell you about yourself and about their view and perspective of you, and you start to kind of put that in the gumbo of your definition of self, and
Right.
obviously that doesn't work. And so you went through a lot in your 20s, and then you moved to Bali for 2 years. You
Yeah.
went against family tradition, family expectations, the
Right.
limitations, some of your own, some of those around you. And you went to Bali for 2 years and learned above all things you are self-reliant, and
Yeah.
that no matter what, you have to be the person that you've been waiting for. You have to show up for you. You have to be your cheerleader, and you have
Mhm.
to be the driver You have to be the driver and sometimes the passenger at the same time.
Yeah, that's right. You got to be able to do it all. You got to learn to adapt,
You have to
right?
learn to adapt. And
Right.
so it is this now that so you're moving out of your 20s and you're going into age 30. Let's pick up from there.
Okay.
Where are you, right, at the beginning of this new decade that's approaching? What is your mindset? What is your intention? And how did that play out?
Okay. So kind of moving towards of knowing what I want to do, where I want to be. So this was when I was in the police force, and I guess my journey in the police force was coming to an end, right? Because I wasn't happy there, but I didn't realize how much stress it was bringing on me mentally and on my body. And I remember waking up one day, I went to sleep the night before, perfectly fine. Woke up the next morning, jumped in the shower. As soon as the hot water touched my skin, it started burning. So
Wow.
I jumped out, looked in the mirror, and found that my entire body had come out in a rash.
Wow.
And so I was like, I don't know, again, what the hell is going on here? Went to the hospital, had all these tests done, and waited in the consultation room for my doctor to come in to tell me, basically what was going on with me.
Mhm.
And he opened the consultation door, he looked straight at me, and he goes to me, "You were lucky you got here when you did." So I was like, "What do you mean? What's going on?" He goes, "If you didn't get here when you did, your throat would have closed up."
Wow.
So that was a wake-up call. And I was like, holy crap. I'm like, how did this happen? And he goes, this type of rash is formed because you're overly stressed. And so at that point, I made a decision that I'm no longer going to be working as a police officer. I quit my job, didn't have a plan B. All I knew is that my life is on the line now, and what I'm doing isn't working, so I need to change something.
Okay, so is this after Bali?
This is before Bali.
Okay, this is before Bali. Okay.
Yeah.
So that kind of feeds into why you really needed to jump, like you were saying,
Yes.
because everything was not working. Okay.
Right.
So Bali's was in fact in your 30s. You were kind of going through all of the uncertainties, going from job to job, and just really trying to see if you can erect some kind of identity, right? Like connecting to a job or something that you're doing and have an epiphany like, oh, who knew? I am supposed to be a cop. And we think like that sometimes, right? Like it's going to find us. Like our destiny and our purpose and our identity is out there somewhere.
Right.
We're into it. Like still hadn't learned self-care.
No.
Right? Everything else that you were probably focused on seemed a little bit rooted into knowing who you are and having that definition without it being scoped or contextualized by someone else's narrative.
Right.
But in doing so, it seems like you neglected the self-care component. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So first of all, I didn't know what self-care was. Like no one ever spoke about that. Family never spoke about that. Friends never spoke about that. No one actually spoke about self-care and taking care of yourself. The way that I knew, or the people that had around me spoke about self-care such was making sure you had the right job, making money, paying the bills, right? Like the normal everyday stuff, but no one actually spoke about how to actually take care of you physically, mentally, or emotionally. So that wasn't even in my radar, right? It was not until I got to Bali and people started talking about self-love, and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds a bit weird. Self-love? What are you talking about? Yeah. And then when I kind of got into it a little bit more, and I was like, oh, okay, I understand what this means now. Like, why do people not talk about this?
When you recognize how neglected you've been to yourself, was there a feeling of sadness or grief that you had to go through when you really recognize that?
No, do you know what? I had a different perspective on that. When I realized that, I was like, holy crap, right. I'm booking to get my nails done. I'm booking for a massage. I'm getting a facial. I'm doing my hair. I was like, holy crap. I was like, this isn't a luxury, it's a must. Right. So then I got excited about that. I was like, yeah, I love all that stuff. Now I have a reason to do all this stuff. Right. So I wasn't feeling sadness at all. I was excited to see what there was to come.
Were you able to recognize some of the decisions that you made prior to that awareness of not having enough self-care and how it had played a role in relationships and friendships? Were you able to kind of see the writing on the wall?
I did definitely realize that I didn't value myself at all. But then at the same time, I didn't know how to value myself. I didn't know what that meant to value myself. I understand the word standing up for yourself, but that's completely different to actually valuing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw where I went wrong, but I didn't actually kind of focus on that. I was like, okay, I've identified, I've assessed it, I've identified it. Right. Now, what am I going to do to change it? And the things that I wanted to do in order to change it was all fun things. Right. So why kind of sit there in misery and thinking about the past? The past is the past. Let's move forward. And I was always, I guess, someone that enjoyed or got excited about self-development and moving forward and being better and getting better. Right. So when I figured out, oh, these are the mistakes I'm making, this is the changes I need to do, it was exciting for me because I cracked another secret.
Yes, another level. A lot of people though, like when we're having these conversations and it's, probably like 30, 45 minutes and it seems so rapid in occurrence, right? And they think, okay, well, if I could just have this shift in thought, or if I could just look at things this way, then if P, then Q. What was the timing like for that process for you? Because, if you're in Bali for 2 years and you're really focusing a lot on your own self-development and your own healing and your own kind of introspection of your experiences that you're having versus the ones that you perceive to be having, that in itself is a great deal of time that you're investing in that process and could play a role in terms of the paradigm shift you were able to have having gone through that that learning or that healing. So what's the time period that you're feeling these incremental shifts happen? Because people sometimes get disappointed because they feel like they're not happening fast enough, and they really, read a self-help book or they hear somebody and they want to have that whole experience without the longevity of, what it sometimes takes. So what is that time period for you?
Oh, goodness. So I think personally for me, it happened a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the specifics. All I know is that I go with my gut. And when I actually left Bali to come back home to the UK, it's because I knew there was nothing else left for me in Bali, right? Like what I came to do in Bali, I've done. There's nothing else here for me, right? But also why I felt like, okay, 2 years seems like a long time, but it's not a long time after you've gone through so many different things prior, right? But why I feel like it went so quick for me is because, like I was saying, friends and family were telling me, what I should be doing and what I'm doing is wrong. But I took myself out of that and basically isolated myself when nobody knows me. No one can be in my ear telling me, all this negative chitter chatter. And it was just down to me to figure it out and actually learn from others that are talking about self-love and self-care and all of this. And I didn't have that negativity. So therefore, I was able to absorb the positive, right? And completely eliminate all the negative around me.
And that's advantageous because so often people want to do that. I had an episode where I was talking to someone about the social disparities that exist sometimes, the socioeconomic disparities, because a lot of times, quite frankly, probably every 2 years in my life, I feel like I would want to go to a Bali for 2 years. Have that. But for me, like, I'm a mom and I was a single mom, and then there's like the keeping the lights on, and there's this whole cycle of presence that you basically made your bed, and you kind of have to try to find that which you found in Bali in the midst of the day-to-day, sometimes chaos that is your life. In the day,
Right.
sometimes survivalism that is a part of your daily life. How do you feel like you would have made it along this journey without that ability or that opportunity to completely extract yourself
Mhm.
from the environment that feels like it was, or sounds like it was toxic, sounds like it was limiting, sounds like it was just kind of
Right.
like holding you down? How do you feel like, and it's a hypothetical question, of course, but how do you feel like you would have been able to navigate that process without that interlude?
I don't know if I would have, and if I did, I'll probably still be in the process of doing it because it'll take me a lot longer,
Mm.
right? But I don't think I would be in the place that I am right now if I didn't do that.
So
And
removing yourself was very helpful to your growth.
oh yeah, definitely. And I totally found myself, right? So where people tell you, right, you go to school, you go to college, you go to uni, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, you retire, all of that stuff, that I grew up on. I realized I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids. I want to travel and live out of a suitcase. Right? I love living out of a suitcase. Many people don't. I don't want to settle down. I don't want to be in one spot. I would happily, you know, buy a boat and live on the sea, right? Going from country to country, right?
Yes.
Then having a house and staying in one spot.
Because that is your truth. What you found and what you're describing to me, which I absolutely love, is that you found your truth. And
Right.
Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. Sometimes, unfortunately, people aren't in position to afford their truth.
Right.
And
Mhm.
sometimes we see that as like as a economical kind of concept. But in fact, sometimes we can't afford it if we make certain sacrifices, or if we come up with a game plan, or if we say, hey, listen, I'm not about this life. This is my life right now, and this is what I have to do. But I'm not about this life. This is not what I want. And so my plan is to do this, 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 this. Instead, we
Right.
kind of just continue to, kind of wander off with the wave again, because once that self-identity isn't there, there isn't this core, these core tenets that you are rooted in exploring as your life, your
Right.
reality, your truth, your freedom,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And
Mm.
that's exactly, you said freedom. That's exactly what I found. I found freedom rather than feeling locked up in chains because I shouldn't be doing this and shouldn't be doing that. All of a sudden, I was like, I'm free to do it whatever the hell I want, you know?
And let me tell you, freedom is addicting.
Mm.
You're listening to Let's Talk About It. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About It. My guest today is the author of Never Judge a Book by Its Cover, Miss K. Suthner. And I am really enjoying this conversation because I feel like the closest I'll get to Bali is this conversation with you.
Oh no, you got to make it a reality.
When the episode finishes, I'm going to ask you about the beach and the sand and just kind of live vicariously through you for a little bit.
No problem.
So you went to Bali, you had this experience, you spent 2 years, you did a lot of reflection, a lot of meditating, a lot of deep diving within the self, and you come back and what is that like when you get back?
So I got back And I was like, okay, so I've pretty much figured out what I want to do, what I don't want to do. And I decided that, okay, I'm going to maybe spend a little while with family because I have been away for 2 years.
Mhm.
And then I was ready to then pack my bags and leave again. I had another plan, right?
But when you were spending time with your family, were you then more aware of triggers? So before you left and before you were so grounded in yourself, if somebody said something, a slight remark, it would have affected you one way. And so now after you come back, if that happens, if there's a criticism or if there's a suggestion or if there's a, you really need to be doing this instead of that, are you having some of those same experiences and are you observing yourself internalizing them differently than pre-Bali?
Um, yes and no. And the reason why I say yes and no was, yes, there's a lot of things that I did learn from Bali, but also I still have mentors and coaches myself, right? That helped me with all of this as well and
Mhm.
helped me with seeing a different perspective on things. And now, so a bit of both definitely goes a long way. And what I found now is when people tell me something that don't necessarily make sense to me or don't like it, or they tell me I'm not living the right way,
Mhm.
I'm kind of now like, well, I guess that's a you problem, not a me problem, right?
Change your perspective,
Yeah.
pre-Bali and post-Bali,
Hmm.
because the people really a lot of times don't change, right? The condescending
Right.
auntie is still the condescending auntie. The I know more than you cousin is still that, right? And you
Right.
feel a different kind of energy going through your body now when you're around them because those soft spots have been kind of worked on and worked through. And so you're not, so it's not, you're not so palatable to their ups and downs, of their opinions and what they think and feel. So I imagine that must have felt and still do very empowering to not to go from being a person who the world is telling like you're not this, you're not that.
Right.
Now when you hear it, as you said, it's like, oh, sounds like a you problem to me.
Right. Yeah, definitely is. Don't get me wrong, I still have my moments. I'm still human, right?
Absolutely. And I love you
Um,
acknowledging that. I love you acknowledging that because it says to our listeners and viewers, listen, you're never going to get to a point of complete desensitization. And if
no.
you have that expectation and something happens and you feel it, you can interpret that as a failure or you not doing enough work or you not doing the work. So it's a constant process that you are working on daily. You
Oh
just need
yeah,
to
definitely. Yes.
okay.
But also what I really want the viewers to realize is that when people are mean or horrible or very negative towards you, right? It actually has nothing to do with you. It's
Mhm.
all about them.
Hurt people.
Right.
That's cliche, but it really is true. It's
It
their
is.
experience that they're having. And
Mm-hmm.
quite often they're in the midst of a crisis. You just can't see the crisis they're in because
No.
you're not having the experience that they're having. It just externalizes in a way where it seems like the intention of it is just solely to hurt you. But quite often they're so wounded themselves that they're not even able to recognize the difference between,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And also keeping in mind that the way people react, right? So for example, if someone's turned around and says, "Oh my God, that case, she's such an a-hole,"
Mhm,
right? And
mhm.
I could kind of swing for the person and jump him and throw a few punches, or I could just be like, "Yeah, I guess I can be,"
Yeah.
you know, right?
Okay, that's Mrs. Please don't forget the Mrs. A-hole for you. Thank you.
Right? Because a lot of the time when people react to something like that and someone's yes, someone calls someone an a-hole and they just kind of jump on them or go mad and start screaming and shouting, it has nothing to do with the fact that you call them an a-hole. It
It's
has
because they think
everything
they
to
are.
do right, even if they are, but it's got everything to do with the way it made them feel by you calling them an a-hole. You
And what
probably,
it triggers, because
yes,
sometimes it's not even you calling them that. Sometimes it's something that it triggers from someone else that called them that, and how it made them feel and how powerless they were in that situation.
yes,
And now that they're in a situation where they're not powerless, sorry for you, you picked the wrong one, picked the wrong
right. Right. And so you don't know what that person's going through, you don't know what they have been through, but they're reacting because you probably hurt their pride, hurt their ego, or brought something back that's happened to them.
their inner child.
Yeah.
Because that's when a lot of times people lash out the most, because that wounded inner child is there, and you touch the wrong soft spot, and then you have two people that's lashing out, not about the experience that's actually happening in that moment, but as a reaction to previous experience they've had in the past,
Right.
and they're reacting to.
So I was just gonna say, yes. So if someone says something to you that you don't like, just don't react. Like, you gotta think it's got nothing to do with me. It's all them. It's a them problem, not a you problem.
In the words of the famous poet Jay-Z, get that dirt off your shoulder.
Right.
All right, when we come back, I want to talk about this book. I want to talk about Don't
Never
Judge
judge.
Cover,
Yeah.
and the letter you received from the Queen herself about your book.
Yes.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages. You are listening to Let's Talk About It. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About It. My guest today is Kalpna Suthar, author of Never Judge a Book by Its Cover. Before the break, we were talking about her journey as she navigated her way to herself and the lessons that she learned along the way. And so for the remainder of the show, I really want to spend a few minutes talking about the book and why you wrote the book, what you hope people will get from the book, and find out about the letter and you got from the Queen about your book in her personal library. So tell us a little bit about the book.
So my book, Never Judge a Book by Its Cover, is really about the different types of turbulence that I experienced, that I went through, from, personal relationships, with my ex-boyfriend being so abusive, to the relationship I had with my mom and dad, to the friends I had around me, to my career, and then also battling myself and trying to figure out who I am. And so a lot of the turbulence, I always call it turbulence because it that's exactly what it is a bumpy road, or is that plane ride that is going through a storm. And so I realized that there's certain things that I've gone through that it was because there was a lesson to be learned. So I realized that the abusive relationship that I went through was because, number one, I needed to gain that thick skin, and number two, it allowed me to realize what I will tolerate and what I wouldn't tolerate from a person, which I didn't know before. So some of the lessons that I learned through the turbulence that I went through was, first of all, the abusive relationship that I had, that I learned from a person on how they treat me. Before that, I had no idea. The other thing that I learned was, well, the people I have around me were very toxic. My friends were very toxic, right? Now, I guess it wasn't their fault because they're telling me how I should and shouldn't be living because that's how their parents told them. But I realized that I needed a cleanse. There needs to be a cleanse where I guess I've grown out of those people, and then no longer it's not working for me. So I had to realize that I needed to build another community around me that was supportive of me, right? And so therefore I had to cleanse and kind of get rid of some of the people. The third thing I guess I learned was, your family always going to be family. There's nothing you can do about that. And so learning how to how do I say it, tolerate them, or learning their perspective as to how they view things for me to understand how to then respond to them now. Right? Because at the end of the day, my parents, and they do love me, and I get that. But their perspective on how I should be living, again, was something that they grew up with, that they know. They don't know anything else. And so my understanding of that helped me to kind of explain to them why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. It isn't necessarily wrong, it's just different.
What do you think someone will take away after they read your book?
That things happen for a reason, and there are definitely lessons to be learned. And sometimes we have to go through a lot of ups and downs to learn that lesson. Otherwise, we'll never learn those lessons. And so learning a lot about yourself, right, is one thing that you will learn out of all these different, experiences you go through. And also how do I say it? Coach, teach, train other people how to treat you.
Because if you're not doing it, how will they know how to? Unless they're already done enough work within themselves. And quite frankly, very seldom do we meet people with like, whoa, you've done all the, your expectation is a part of that teaching process for them too, because you're a new person. I mean, you weren't born with them. They had a whole life before you.
Right.
And having that value of yourself is a really, really good marker to establish the boundaries that you understand that you need in order to successfully navigate your life.
Definitely. And that, well, when you have new people coming in your life all the time, you know whether they're keepers or not. Yeah. Right. And you can make that decision very, very quickly, knowing what it is that you'll tolerate and what you won't. But however, your family are very different. Family you can't get rid of like that, right? Yeah. as much as we may want to get rid of that annoying auntie that just can't stop telling you when you're going to get married because that's how you should be living, right? You got to be able to understand, okay, they come from a very different place to where we're at, and understanding those people will help you be able to kind of respond to them, not in a negative way, but be able to explain to them that this is a new way of living now. Right?
Having gone through these experiences, wrote a book, really kind of dug really, really deep to find yourself and to live and stand in your truth and continue to be the work in progress that you are and strive to be. How have you translated that into helping other people?
So a lot of things that I guess individuals are going through don't understand, they're unaware, just like I was. Mm-hmm. However, because I've gone through it myself, I can almost kind of see where they're headed. And to kind of prevent people heading down a road that they don't want to be down, I'm able to kind of steer them back onto the right direction and kind of give them my perspective and understanding and explanation as to if they keep going down this road, where they're going to end up. Wherever they're going to end up is not going to be a place they want to be. It's going to be a lot of heartache, and it is going to be, learning how to kind of recover from all of that. So I'll be able to steer them in the right direction as to the goals and dreams they want to go down, so that, they don't have to go through the same things that I did. So when I wrote my book, Never Judge a Book by Its Cover, I didn't even realize or was even aware of kind of, what I was going through, what I went through. And what people will actually really learn from this book is that, first of all, you'll probably be able to relate to some of the things that went through it, and you'll be able to identify a lot of things that maybe you've gone through or something that's triggered you that I wasn't even aware of at the time. And you'll be able to see how I actually worked through that process to get to the other end, and that there is a light at the other end of the tunnel. and that there's certain lessons to be learned throughout your entire journey, to make you a better person, to make you a stronger person. And so learning how to kind of go through, whether it's, being abused or having a volatile relationship with your parents, or your friends telling you that you need to be living a certain way, you're going to realize, or you're going to come to realize that there's certain things that you will be able to tolerate and what you won't tolerate anymore, and then being able to value yourself, and also being aware of what the kinds of things that you're okay with and what you're not okay with. But without going through those experiences, like I was, you're going to be, it's almost like you're lost. You're not going to know who you are, what you want to do, or anything like that until you have those experiences. In addition, I feel that the readers will read this book and use it as a preventative measure, because you really don't need to go through what I went through to learn the lesson, and you'll be able to kind of pick up the little triggers or relate back to, or you might be halfway through a journey that I went through, and then be able to realize for yourself what you need to do in order to change the direction of the path that you're going through, right? So you can prevent having a heartache or a bigger heartache, because you don't need to go through down that path, and that you can completely change it by having a different perspective.
Wow. Change the course of your life by changing your perspective.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love that. I love your vulnerability, and I love your openness, and I love that you're willing to share your experience, share what you were thinking, share the limitation, the dysfunctional thought process, the functional thought process, the coping mechanism that you learned through epiphany, and the coping mechanisms that, evolved out of, hey, I have to do this to survive, and also transitioning into that space where you got to understand that the world judging a book by its cover is the world judging a book by its cover. Ultimately, what matters is your sense of self, your love of self, your care for self, and the world can continue to judge however it sees fit.
Yeah, use it as your motivation to fight back.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. We covered so much. We ran out of time. There's so much more that you can find out about our author and about our book. It's available on Amazon. Never Judge a Book by Its Cover. How can people reach you? Where are your website, social media information? Share that with us.
You can find me on my website, www.uncensoredsociety.com. Or if you would like to learn more, if you would like to, build a better life for yourself, build a community of people that are supportive, and you want someone like me to keep you accountable, making sure that your goals and your dreams are met, then come and join the Facebook group. We've got the Facebook group. I do one-on-one coaching. I also do group coaching. So there's various different ways. I'm also going to be launching a podcast soon as well. But all the updates will be in that group. So as long as you're in that in the Facebook group, you're definitely going to get all the upcoming goodies that are going to be launched very shortly. On facebook.com/group/Uncensored Society.
And we're going to have that posted on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. If you go to iamdenise.com, send us a contact us message. We'll be more than happy to share that information with you. Okay. And as usual, I'm a strong supporter of traditional therapy, and none of these ideas are to replace traditional therapy. If you're in a space where that is the tool that is needed and is necessary, I always recommend that first. I think classes and support groups, such as the ones that you offer, is really good in terms of peer support because you've been there and you've done that and you're able to share your ideas and your experience with others who may be going through something similar. But as usual, as I always say in all my episodes, is not a substitution for traditional therapy. And I strongly suggest if you are at a space where you're completely overwhelmed, that is a place for you to start. And this could be an additional tool that you use in order to strengthen that area of personal growth and development.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for joining me today on another episode of Let's Talk About It. I wish you nothing but the best, success, blessings, life, prosperity, and I can tell that you are so happy because you always have a smile on your face.
Definitely.
That is awesome. You know, it takes a lot to get there, but once you get there, you fight like hell to continue to remain there.
Yeah, and that's what everyone needs to remember to do.
Yes. All right, guys. Join us next week for another new episode of Let's Talk About It. As usual, it's always a pleasure to have you guys either on YouTube or listening to us on a podcast. If you are watching this on YouTube, I feel inclined to say subscribe. I'm working up to like saying that more like without it feeling so torturous because every video I watch, people are like, subscribe.
Right.
So, there's a little red button that says subscribe so you can have updates on new episodes and you can share episodes that you like, that you feel like would be beneficial to others. As I always say before I go, take care of yourself and each other. You've been listening and watching, so let's talk about it. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the podcast, Let's Talk About It. Feel free to support our podcast by selecting the sponsorship link on this platform. Drop us a line or even be one of our guests. Visit us on the web at www.imdenise.com to learn more.